For 6.4 example 2 in the factoring polynomials section, we are going to look at factoring by grouping. So this works when we have 4 terms in our polynomial and we want to group together the first 2 and the last 2. So we are going to look at x to the third and 3x squared and figure out what do they have in common. Well, there's no number in common because x to the third has a coefficient of 1. So they have x's in common, and the most that they can have in common is x squared. So if I factor out an x squared out of all of that, I would have 1x left from the x to the third, and then I would have just that plus 3 left from that second term. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the second set of parentheses. And we're going to look at the numbers, -4 and -12. They would have a -4 in common. They do not have an x in common because the 12 doesn't have an x. And then when I do -4 divided by -4, I get 1, so I just have that x left. And -12 divided by -4 is a positive 3 left over. So then what do my two sets? So if you kind of pretend that this right there divides it into half, what does both sides have in common? Well, they have an x plus 3 in common, and then in your second set of parentheses, you write what is left over. There's an x squared and a -4, so x squared minus 4. And that is your factored answer after factor by group. So for this one, our first 2 is x to the third power and -2x squared. What do they have in common? So the first example I did just by looking at it. The other thing that you can do is write out what each one equals. So x to the third would be x times x times x. And -2x squared, that negative sign is like a -1. The prime factorization of 2 is 2, and x squared is x times x. And then you look, what do they have in common? The only thing they have in common is 2 x's. So they have x squared in common, and then you write what is left over. X to the third power has 1x left, and -2x squared has -1 times 2 left, so that would be a -2. And then you can do the same thing here, the -9x prime factorization, well, negative sign is -1, and then prime factorization of 9 is 3 times 3, and then there's an x. And then we have a positive 18. So prime factorization of 18, 2 is prime, 2 times 9, and then 9 breaks down to 3 times 3. So what do they have in common? They have the 2 3's in common. So that would be a 9, a positive 9 in common. And then what's left over from the -9x? It looks like a -x. And what's left over from the 18 is a positive 2. Then you look at these, and you notice that the yellow in the parentheses is x minus 2, and the pink is -x plus 2. So they're opposites. So what we're going to do is in the pink, we're going to factor out a -1. So we're going to divide everything by -1 in the pink. So we get -9, a positive x, and a -2. And notice we didn't do anything with the yellow because we want the x part to be positive. Then what do they have in common? They have the x minus 2 in common, so that gets written. And then what's left over? X squared minus 9. And that's your factored answer for that one. And our last one here, one more time, we're going to do the same thing. So the first 2. 2 is prime, x to the third, and then x to the second power would have just an x to the second power. And again, you can write out and see what's in common, see what's left over if that helps you, or you can just look at them. So they both have an x squared in common. After I take out the x squared, I'm going to have a 2 and an x left. And then our last term is x squared. And if I take that away, I still have to put a +1. I have to have a placeholder there. And then I'm going to look at the second set. 8 and 4 have a 4 in common, so plus 4. And 8 divided by 4 is 2. And then we didn't touch the x. And then 4 divided by 4 is 1. So again, we have to put a placeholder there with the 1. Then what do they have in common? They have the 2x plus 1 in common. And what's left over? X squared and a positive 4 is your second set of parentheses. So your fully factored version is the quantity of 2x plus 1 times the quantity of x squared plus 4.